Hello and welcome. We are live for episode 33 of the VCD Roundtable. As you might have seen, we are a bit more on a more regular schedule by now and have a few more topics. So we hope to keep it like that. Today's topic is something which kind of actually came to a surprise to many service providers, because there are changes going on in regards to how you can actually utilize Kubernetes in a service provider environment. There have always been multiple different ways. I mean, you could always do everything manually, just deploying Kubernetes within a bunch of VMs within a tenant. You had the different TKG versions, and you had CSE. But before we actually go into that, I would say I'm going to hand over for Toby for a quick hello, and then he can throw over to Sasha, and Sasha can then try, if his internet connection is going to survive, to kind of summarize the different ways we had in the past, let's say before 10.6, and what we know and how we continue, and then we go into the discussion. Toby.
Yeah, hello and welcome to episode 33. Let's have a look what's going on in the Kubernetes environment or in the Tanzu environment. Sasha.
Yeah, hi. Also welcome from my side. And today we want to talk what options do we have to run Kubernetes as a service provider in the with Cloud Director in the VMware world. And in the past, we had the option with TKGs, so the supervisor cluster in a vSphere environment that we bring in as a provider VDC, so bring in the cluster with supervisor cluster enabled. That is an important point. The cluster must be enabled with supervisor cluster, with workload management. At the point we integrate the cluster as a provider VDC in our Cloud Director. That was one option, but the problem was every time we are directly bound on a cluster, and it was not, we are not able to move the clusters, the Kubernetes cluster, from one cluster to another cluster or on a different availability zone or whatever. And because of that, most of the service providers started to go with with CSE. So CSE Container Service Extension runs on Cloud Director, can provide TKGm clusters, are directly integrated with the networking stuff. So bounded on NSXT, created load balancer services directly in NSXALB, and this was fully automated and was running is running in the latest 10.5 version of Cloud Director and CSE 4.2. That's all possible, running without problems. And then a few weeks ago, there come the announcement, so only a short mail, hey, dear service providers, now everything is changing. TKGm is not longer supported starting on Monday. So it was on Thursday, we got this message. And next Monday, it was not longer supported. And that was also the day where 10.6 was released. So Cloud Director 10.6. And as there was this incident in 10.5, many of the service providers said, hey, we directly want to go to 10.6, and got the problem that CSE was not longer running. So the CSE plugin was not longer supported with 10.6 Cloud Director. And that brings service provider to a problem, because they were not able to roll out new Kubernetes cluster. They are not able to upgrade Kubernetes clusters, and they are not able to upgrade the amount of control plane or workload nodes. And with that, the discussion begins. We tried to figure out what are the plans from VMware, what is the cause of this problem. And the only part we can figure out until now is that there is a direct split between the business units. So we have the VCF business unit, who owns TKGs, so Tanzu Kubernetes Grid with a supervisor cluster. and we have the Tanzu business unit who owns the TKGm, and there is currently no licensing between these two business units for the service providers. We tried to contact the Tanzu BU, but until now we don't get any feedback about that. What happens with these licenses? What are the licenses and service providers can buy or can license, subscriptions, whatever, to provide TKGm clusters for their customers. So that's the current state. And the service providers running CSE on service providers Premier and Pinnacle service providers were not longer able to download the newest version, the supported version of CSE 4.2.2 that is running with 10.6 Cloud Director. Now in the last days there were another change, so all of these service providers are again able to download CSE 4.2.2 plugin and CSE server 4.2.2, but it is still the problem that TKGm is not longer supported, and you will maybe not longer get support from VMware for TKGm clusters, and that is a big problem if you run it in a production environment. So we still try to figure out what are the best ways to solve these problems. And maybe one more information about that. So currently we try to figure out, because if we get the TKG, or where we can, or if it is possible to get latest versions of TKGm, because if you're running 10.6, running the latest CSE 4.2.2, you are not able to roll out clusters with the old images. That means you can manage your old ones, but you cannot upgrade and cannot create new Kubernetes clusters.
So to get it really in a short overview, what possibilities do we have currently? So if I have if I'm a service provider running already on 10.6, can I still utilize CSE at the moment?
You can still utilize CSE with your old clusters, but you cannot create new clusters.
But
you cannot upgrade.
And I cannot upgrade, and I cannot deploy a new cluster. So if I'm still on 10.5,
when you are on 10.5 with CSE 4.2, you can run everything. So every Kubernetes cluster, you can create new ones and you can upgrade Kubernetes clusters.
Okay, so that's the CSE part. On the vSphere with Tanzu, or on the supervisor cluster, can I go on 10.6? Yes.
Yes, you can go on 10.6 with the supervisor cluster, but there is also a limitation that is not running if you run the latest supervisor, the latest vSphere version with 8 update 3. Mm-hmm. That is currently not supported in both. So it is not supported with 10.6 and not supported with 10.5.
Okay, so I still need to stay on vSphere 8. Update 2 or
vSphere 7.
Yeah, okay. So a little bit of mess at the moment for the whole Kubernetes environment.
That's right. But we have the option to go with TKGS, also create new clusters with TKGS. But the problem here is, as said before, you need to create a new cluster, configure supervisor cluster, and then import it to Cloud Director. You are not able to activate supervisor cluster after you have integrated the cluster as a provider VDC.
Mm-hmm. So I always need to have in mind that I need to first of all create the supervisor cluster in my vSphere environment, and afterwards I can start to create the PVDC.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Not the best situation currently.
I think overall it's if as a service provider or if in general, you can turn it both ways around. If on one hand VMware by Broadcom wants to actually still encourage service providers to run Kubernetes in a VCD environment, they urgently need to come up with a solution, and actually a reasonable solution, also from a pricing perspective. Because I think from what we see here is this change actually, and as Sasha said, it's like the business units are now completely separated, is coming also because someone needs to pay for licenses for something. And but the big question is like how much do they expect to happen there? Because when I look at the enterprise commercial space, it seems like that Tanzu is more or less an all-you-can-eat bucket now, and you just actually get the massive big chunk to chew on. But that will not necessarily work for the service providers, because the service providers have the challenge that the majority of these products are not yet multi-tenant enabled. So that is not going to work. The other question is, does the VCF business unit want to actually go ahead and actually make the supervisor clusters the way moving forward and just change CSE the way it should actually be? Which sounds like, from all we hear, sounds like the more realistic scenario that is going to happen. But even there, we now have the situation with 10.6 and everything is, this is nothing which has weeks or months of, or I mean weeks maybe, but it doesn't have months or years of time. So this urgently needs to be decided, because a lot of service providers in the last couple of months had delayed their Kubernetes projects in the first place, how they are going to onboard it. But now they are looking into alternate solutions from different vendors or something else if there is no solution. I think it's urgently required that there is a real roadmap and stuff like that coming from VMware and actually explaining on how this is going to work. Because if that's not going to happen, people are going to do, or people need to do something. Because so if I look at our service providers, so many of them are actually have started to build a managed Kubernetes or something similar in infrastructure as a service solution. And many of them were already, let's call it, bitten by the new license model with the recent changes in regards to load balancing and everything else. And if now there is an additional massive cost coming from the Tanzu side, then my expectation is that there is not many people actually going to run Kubernetes workloads in a service provider environment anymore. And I'm not really sure if that's what the plan is. If that is the plan, then it would be better if someone would openly communicate it. Because just actually disabling features and functions and saying it's like, pooh, you need to figure it out. What we saw now with 10.6 is not necessarily the approach which is going to work moving forward.
Yeah, it's again a problem of communication. So nobody knows what happens and what are the next steps. So I had some meetings here in the Middle East, and it's everywhere the same. And every service provider complained that the communication stacks and nobody knows what's next, what are the changes that are planned, what are the next points coming up. So we can give you a lot of information, but still we are stucking with informations, and need to work on that part.
Yeah, but also on the other hand, what is quite interesting, because we had talked in the last episode, we talked about VCF 5.2. So we see a lot of improvement on the VCF side from a Kubernetes perspective. But as you just mentioned, Sasha, it looks like that the other business unit, especially currently the Cloud Director business unit, has not been made aware of these changes on the VCF side, because we have now a kind of, or to be honest, we get a starting point of a kind of a self-service for Kubernetes directly in VCF, which is because it's the nature of Kubernetes. Kubernetes is out of the box multi-tenancy capable. So there is just, from my perspective, there are just some missing bits and bits between Cloud Director and VCF at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the hard point for all of the service providers is that, yeah, the Tanzu business unit or Tanzu and VMware told in the past every time there will not longer be a TKGm and TKGS. They will be combined, and you will only have one product for all, run it on-prem and in the cloud. And now we have the complete opposite. It was splitted more than it was before, and yeah, we try to get the answer from the Tanzu business unit. Maybe there is an interesting program around the TKGm for the service providers, maybe including again Tanzu Mission Control, because that was also an interesting story, because it was on the price list on the beginning for the service providers, and then from one to another day, without any information, it was removed. And yeah, that's a problem for a few service providers who still running Tanzu Mission Control.
Mission control.
Yeah, so what would be our suggestion at the moment for the service providers? If you are not on 10.6, stay on your 10.5 infrastructure and don't upgrade.
Yes.
And wait until there is hopefully a solution coming in the next couple of days, weeks whatsoever. Does this also work? So if you did anyone check already if when you apply the hot fixes for 10.5 for the latest security patches, is that actually going to destroy it as well?
What I got is that this is running without problems. Okay. That's only in 10.6. And in 10.6, it is also the information that is running only with CSE 4.2.2. That's the information we missed before.
Okay. And then hopefully we will get, we tried before the episode to get more answers from the Tanzu group and Tanzu field over different channels, but we didn't really get anything. So if anyone from the Tanzu business unit or Tanzu team wants to actually set the information straight, we are more than happy to actually add more information afterwards to this VCD roundtable, or actually set up another episode and invite anyone to actually really talk about the future and the scenario and everything else. And we had longer discussions about whether we will actually make this episode the way it is and do this. But I think it's very important for every service provider at the moment to know what potential scenario they are bringing themselves into if they are not necessarily looking very, very closely what they do. Because the big question for me is, again, I don't know exactly how the CSE and backend licensing and everything works. It's like, even if you are staying on 10.5, I'm not sure where you are really from a licensing perspective. And this is not a legal advisory council. So this is something you need to figure out for yourself as a service provider. I know it's completely unsatisfying, but I think we at least thought it's very, very important that we all cover this and make everybody aware. And then everybody can take their own decisions, but also feedback potentially to the different teams within VMware by Broadcom that you were planning to actually do a Kubernetes business or a Tanzu business and stuff like that, and that you are completely stuck now, and that everybody needs answers. Good. Anything else to add on that topic before we actually talk about what's going to be on the next episode, which is going to be far more fun? Okay, sounds like a no. So
yeah, just one last thing. Sasha, is vSphere zones already supported in Cloud Director? Do you know it out of your head?
I don't know, but I'm also not sure if vSphere zones is so interesting with the new structure of TKGs in the future, because it will be independent of the cluster and the supervisor cluster. You can create independent management clusters and workload clusters. So
let's see. Okay. Then, Yves, back to you.
Okay. So, yeah, this was episode VCD Roundtable, episode number 33 on CSE, future of Kubernetes, etc. We would have hoped to have a bit more direct feedback on certain things. Next episode, however, is something which we have more or less completely under our own control, because we are going to talk about networking again. And Matthias is also going to join us. We talk about a lot of the new network features, which on one end VCD 10.6 bring you and some other changes bring you, and how you can actually change your design and architecture moving forward with VCD 10.6 and all the latest and greatest and things ahead. So I think that is actually going to be a far more tech discussion episode again. And there is not so much of a limitation perspective. Surely we are going to cover a few things about, hey, if you want to use this and that, you need this and that license. But overall, I think we are in good shape. Also, quick reminder again, it's only 1.5 months until we are hitting VMware Explore in Las Vegas. From what I heard yesterday, at least if everything goes as planned, as far as I understand, it sounds like we will get more or less a pretty similar attendee count. So I was surprised to hear that number. I'm not sure if someone tries to trick me into something, but it sounds like they are pretty much good back on track. Also some feedback, if you can actually still, even this year, use your PS credits to buy VMware Explore tickets, at least in the US. I have no clue how that works for me then out, but that is also important. If you have credits to burn down, is like that might be a good party. And we, as we said, it's like we will have the ComDivision Customer Briefing Center, and we will have a wonderful poker tournament on Monday evening. So reach out to any one of us if you want to know how to get access to the poker tournament, and so that you could actually join on that one. We have a few fun prizes to get out of, and you don't need to spend your own money. I had a discussion 2 days ago with it's like, but this is going to be weird depending on who you bring to the table. It's like, no, this is actually everybody gets the same amount of chips, and then we look at the end who actually gets out with the most. Good. With that being said, I think the next recording is in 2 weeks. Sasha is going to join me by then, I think, back in the US. And then we are going to cover that topic. And up until then, have a nice time, and we keep you posted. Any final words, Sasha?
Yeah, take a look. What updates you currently install? What are the changes? What are the dependencies? I think that becomes more and more important, and we will keep you up to date as soon as we get news.
Our release notes are totally over.
Sorry.
And you should definitely always try to put things into your lab infrastructure first and test it.
Have a QA environment. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for attention. Thanks for your attention, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you. Have a good one.